We're doing a series right now. We're taking classic songs to tell classic truths. Today is Elton John's Candle in the Wind. There's a line in it. This is the reason we're using this song. There's a line in it which says this: "And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind." And it's describing a particular person by the name of Norma Jean. And Norma Jean's a sad story. Norma Jean was, her parents or her mom actually had some mental issues, so she went into the foster home. In that foster home, she ends up being raped at 8 years old. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And she goes to their foster parents and tells them what happens, and they actually beat her because they're like, that person pays good rent. It's not about you. And so she learned early that it's not about her, and she kind of moved through life that way. She was very pretty, and the boys started noticing her, but she was never really treated well. And those looks ended up being something where it was taken advantage of. And then she went to Hollywood, became Marilyn Monroe. She renamed herself. And as Marilyn Monroe, everyone said, "You're a sex symbol." She's like, "I want to be an actress." But they made her into a sex symbol instead. And she married 3 different guys, all ends terribly. And at 36 years old, she killed herself. It's just a tragic story, and that's what this song is about. It's chronicling this life, because as they researched what happened on that last final day, the phone was off the hook, and she had called someone and told them how she's feeling, and that person just said, "Don't care." And that was their last things that she heard was, "Don't care." And it's so tragic because these stories, this is not the only one like this. And I want to address that with these questions that they bring out of why. Why is the world this way, and why do some of us feel this way? It's painful. And so as we go through these classic truths, I want to talk through that why question of these kind of stories in our life. Why do we have to live in a world like this? Why would God allow these things? Another one that was really interesting, because what he did is in 1997, he changed all the words for Princess Diana. Same kind of situation. Beautiful woman dies at 36 because the paparazzi are chasing her. They get in the accident in the tunnel or however it worked. And here's a woman who was dedicating her whole life to help. She helped with the AIDS issue. She helped with the landmines in these countries where the landmines were still killing people and all that kind of stuff. She helped with all these different charities about cancer. So he dedicated this song to her, rewrote the words, and then all the proceeds went to her charities. Again, though, 36 years old, dies tragically. And you have to go back to the why questions. Why, God, do we live in a world like this? That's what I want to address with you today. Now, what's cool is the disciples ask Jesus almost this exact question. Turn your Bibles to Luke 13. Luke 13 is where we see it. It's so fascinating. So there's a tragic event. It starts in verse 1. It's not there. You'll have to look in your own Bible here. But it says, "There were some present at the very time who told him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with sacrifices," which is a really weird to say. Pilate killed a bunch of people and then sacrificed it and mixed all the blood together. And so if you know anything about Pilate, if you've studied him, awful, awful person. This kind of stuff happens all the time. And so they come to Jesus. They're like, how could this happen? How could these Galileans be treated this way? Why is this being allowed? Right? Same question they're asking Jesus. We get to see the answer, which is awesome. Verse 2, "And he answered them, 'Do you think these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans?'" Fascinating part of this answer. Because you'd say, well, I don't think so. "Were they worse sinners, Galileans, because they suffered in this way? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish." He's getting at the idea that, guess what? We're all going to die. Most of us, it's going to be tragically, because the best case scenario is we die at an old age, we did everything we wanted to do, we die in our sleep, and we're like, win. That's the win, right? You won if you lived at a certain older age, I suppose, depending on if you didn't have any issues, right? Because some of us don't want to live at an old age because you're going through so many sicknesses and whatnot, right? That's the win. Most of us, it's going to be a tragic death. It's going to be too soon. A bunch of people are going to be around in that moment going, man, why? That's the truth. That's how most of us are going to be. So the question is, and he's kind of pushing them really hard and fast, are you ready? This should cause urgency. Are you using it for that? But then he goes in this really interesting direction here. After that he goes, or those 18 on whom the tower in Siloam fell and killed them, do you think that they were worse offenders than all the others who lived in Jerusalem? So now what he did was go, you think that's bad? Let me tell you about this, which is again an odd choice. Why is he doing this? What is he saying? It would be like today if you were to go to Jesus or go to God and you said, God, why is Putin over there in Russia being allowed to do what he's doing in Ukraine, killing thousands and thousands of people? How could you allow that? And God goes, there was a plane crash in China just a couple months ago. It was a Boeing 727. I don't even know what this is called. Boeing 7, what are they? 747? Something like that. Really not the most important part of the story. But it actually crashed. 132 people died, and it was a maintenance issue. Was one worse than the other? And you're like, no, God, I think you're missing the point. Was one full of bad people? Maybe, I don't know. So you're kind of having the same issues today that he's doing here. And what's his point? He's saying it's not because they were sinners. This tragic accident where this tower crashed, 18 people died, not because they were sinners, just a life situation. This area was state-sanctioned terror, someone using their power to do an awful thing. We should all be very familiar with this. Is it because the Ukrainians were sinners? No, it's because there's just sin. The life is full of these tragic events. Now, what are you going to do with that information? Because all this information causes us to say why and then respond. Are we prepared for our tragic ending? Because this life has a lot of tragic endings. But then he goes somewhere even, I think, more interesting. He says this is the parable of the fig tree. And he told the parable, a man had a tree planted in the vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, look, for 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should I use up the ground? And he answered him, sir, let it alone this year also until I dig around it, I put on manure. Then if it should bear fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down. What is he doing? What does this parable have anything to do with the story before? Here's what I think he is doing. He's saying this life still matters, but you have to understand why it matters, okay? Think of it like this. I got this rope up here for an illustration. And so the thought here is this rope represents your entire life, okay? Your entire life. This part, before this red part here, is before you were born. Now, that's just going to blow all of our minds, but God knew you past the curtain, all right? He knew you way back over there. Like when the world was being created, you were already known. So I can't wrap my own head around it. I don't expect you to either. It's like, okay, cool. Then this part behind the red is my eternity, or our eternity, whoever's putting their own personal touch on this. All of your future, which goes behind the curtain and just keeps going. I circled it around the world. So just keeps going and going and going. Again, blows our mind. I don't know how that works. So we have this red part that actually represents our time on earth. This tiny little red part. And here's what's so interesting about this red part. A lot of us are really working hard right here so that this part right here can be really good. Like we're saving up our life savings so we can be right here and really enjoy this part. Or we're thinking about this part here, and we're always thinking about this part and then this part and this part, and our whole world is centered around this right here. And there's so much more that we don't really think about that much, or at least most don't think about that much. In fact, we're the weirdos if we're thinking about this part more than this part. Most people go, you're crazy. Like, you're thinking about heaven and eternity. You're a weirdo. You're going to that church on Sundays. And I'm like, well, that's a bigger part. I feel like this part is really important. Whereas most people think this part is the most important part. And these verses, if we're looking at them closely, are saying this part matters, but you have to understand why it matters. Have you repented? That's where he goes. Are you prepared for this part? Because here's the $1 million, glad you came to church today. This is what you should take away because I just changed your life. If you care more about this part's better. That is the takeaway. You can all just leave if you want. All right? I'm just saying. So I ran this by my kids. I usually run my sermons by my kids. I like to get their opinion on it. I ask them 2 questions. I go, okay, which part really resonated with you? What did you get out of it? And usually my 12-year-old, she repeats the whole sermon back to me, which is amazing. Like, she has it all, and she does it in 5 minutes and way better than me. I'm like, you should just preach. I'll just have you preach next time. The other 2, my high schoolers, they're a little bit more critical. I know it's shocking, but they're a little bit more critical. And so they like my second question better. My second question is, what part do I still need to finish? Like, there's just some pieces that aren't quite done, which is my way of saying, which part did you not like? But most kind people don't answer questions like that. See, so you say, which part still needs a little bit of tweaking? And they both said the same thing 2 different times. They both go, well, why have the red part at all? And I'm like, oh, that's the right question. That's a really good question. And I've been asked it before, so I understood it. But I'm like, yeah, that's the right question. What's the red part for? Why have this tiny piece when this is going to be awesome? This, I don't know what that was, but this is going to be awesome. Why? What's the red for? And so I begin to explain it. I basically, throughout the rest of my sermon, I go, okay, let's talk about that because I think that's the real question. Why have the red part at all? The red part seems to be about you having free choice to choose God. That seems to be the whole point of it. You have this choice. Now, it's not a choice, like let's say you go back to when you had a girlfriend or boyfriend. If you could put into your girlfriend or boyfriend some kind of chip so that they would love you, and now at that point on, you're like, I'm now loved forever by in my case, a girlfriend, right? Is that real love? I mean, I put a chip in her head. I'm enjoying it, right? But it's not real love. It's not real love. If they don't have the choice to say no, it's not really real. And that's kind of what God's doing. He's saying, okay, I want to give you a free choice because I could create robots. I could easily create robots. But I want you to have free choice. I want you to be able to say yes. Now, I'm going to put all of this information out for you. I'm going to show you an incredible world, an incredible universe. You're going to continue to be blown away by this world. But I'm going to leave just enough faith issue to where it's actually a choice. You're not seeing God go, well, it's like you just have just enough. And so in the just enough, a lot of people choose no. And this is me explaining it to my kids. A lot of people say no, and then what happens is in the no, they still are alive, and they're still making choices, and those choices are hitting lots of different things, and good things are happening to them, but also bad things, and then sometimes those bad things have repercussions, and we have world wars and issues, and there's so many things being bounced because of free choice, causing a lot of bad stuff that we are now facing with songs like this, where that was just a horrible, horrible event, horrible event, horrible event. So that's the world we're in. Now, my son was like, oh, okay, I get it. My daughter said, wait. She was so good. She's like, I still don't understand why. I mean, what about people on like an island who never have the opportunity to hear about Jesus? And, there's so many people in the world where they grow up in like a Muslim country or something. They didn't. How would they have this choice to make with Jesus? Again, the right question. And I go, okay, there is something in what you were saying that takes a lot of study. Like we need to study and study and study for a long time. But I'm going to give you a very Hopper analogy. This isn't out of the Bible, okay? I am going to, in 5 weeks, really explain this and where I got it. But for today, here's the analogy. And I think I've shown it to you before, but think of it as 2 chairs, each representing a person, one on an island, and this one here, one of you in the room, okay? You're all sitting in this chair. This is the cross, all right? This is a record player, but let's pretend there's a cross here. If you're on this island and you're over there going, there's got to be more to this life. The trees, the beach, the ocean, I look at the sky, and I'm just going to call it Sky God because I don't have language for it yet. I haven't learned the language, but I know there's a God. I'm not going to just random chance this thing. And they start turning towards the cross. They're not at the cross. They're not saying the right language, right? But they're moving towards it going, I want to know this God. I know there's more going on. Does that make sense? Then there's all of us. We're about this close when we're born. You know, you have a Bible in your house probably. It's on the news all the time. There's a church on every street corner. You have to purposely look away from the cross. Like the cross is in your face. In fact, most people don't like it. They're like, you're too in my face because you're that close. And a lot of people in this position could just be like, I'm in. And yet in that moment they go, sounds a little fishy. And they choose to go this way. And they're not doing anything horrible. They're just slowly moving away from God. Now, who of these 2 people are closer to God? And it's a hard question to answer. On Father's Day, I'll go way deeper with this. But for today, I'm going to say this one. Because what I find in Scripture, and I'm going to show you those Scriptures later, but there's so many Scriptures that say if you are seeking God, you will find Him. If you're at the door, He will open it. Like it's so many Scriptures saying if you're there, if you're willing to just move, I'm there. And then there's a lot of Scripture that says, I will give you exactly what you want because I love you. I want you to choose this. I want you to choose this. But I also want you to have free choice. I created you. I love you, and I'm going to give you what you want. And if this is what you want, okay. So I'm sure my daughter is convinced now. But she wasn't. She wasn't. She had one more question, and I'll finish with this one. She goes, okay, Dad, but a few months ago, we were at a funeral for a child that was still in the womb. They died in her womb. And we let off the balloon, and it went off into the ocean. And she's like, how did that person have a choice? And I'm like, oh, man, you ask better questions than most people. Most time it's like, which version of the Bible should I be reading? And I'm like, I don't whatever you want. You know, so that's the kind of questions where I'm like, okay, Anna, that is a lifetime of study. And I don't really have an answer for it. And I know everyone wants to know the answer to that. Someone after the service first service, actually asked me, what's the answer? And I go, here's the deal. There are verses about this subject. There is a point where you have to actually be able to make a choice before you can be, sent to hell. That's a little harsh, but there's these whole middle section, especially in the Old Testament, that talks about these layers of where you will still have a choice. Now I'm starting to get really confusing because there's just so much here, but there's a whole part that we could study about Satan being in heaven and still choosing to go away from God. So there's some kind of still choice out there, and I think, babies, there's a piece of it that I go, I think they're still going to have an opportunity for that. Or they're just in heaven. It's one of those 2 scenarios. So I can't answer it fully. I'm sorry. I don't have that answer for you. But I do know this. All of this, all the thinking about the ending, all of it is for us. This whole Bible is for us. Sprinkled into it is about this part. And he says, I want you to experience the best. But if you will look at those sprinkles of this part, the rest of the book is about the red part. And you having the best life here. I'll give you an example. You go into the Old Testament, you get to Exodus. There's an Exodus story. It's about the first 10 to 20 chapters of Exodus. And it's all about these 10 plagues when the Israelites were in the slavery to Egypt. Now, most people hear the plagues and they're like, this is really interesting. There's frogs and locusts. And they get to the last one, they're like, this one's intense. It's the angel of death. The angel of death comes down and takes out all the firstborn unless, and most of you probably know this story, unless you shed the blood of a lamb and you put it onto your doorposts, the angel of the Lord will go, or the angel, what did I say? Whatever, it goes by. Doesn't kill him. Now, why I find this fascinating is a couple reasons. One, they don't know what they're doing. Because the lamb going on the wood posts is foreshadowing the cross. It's all about the cross. But this is when they're in slavery in Egypt in early Bible. Like they have to still go through the wandering years, the promised land, Jesus, he dies and rises from the dead. Now they understand, oh, he's the lamb that was shed for my sins. They don't know any of that. They're back here being told, this is what you do for this. To avoid death, do this. And the best I can think is they go, well, it's like when I shed the lamb for my sins, I'm now saying I'm a sinner, and so forgive me for my sins so I can spend eternity with you. That's the best case scenario that they were thinking. The Egyptians don't even have any idea. I don't know how many did it, but that opportunity was for both. But then there's a second part of that story that gets lost. The second part of the story is this right here. It goes in and it kills the firstborn. But when it sees the blood, it moves on. Why is that fascinating? This angel of death has no idea what's inside that house. Let that sink in for a second. Because you would think the angel of death would go, okay, they got the blood. Let me just peek in there. These are okay. This one, Joe's really bad. Joe needs like double lamb blood before I'm going to continue on. And the reason I know that's how we think is because so many people say, I'm a sinner, forgive me. And then they come back the next week, I can't be forgiven. My sins are too bad. And they come back the following week, my sins are too much. It didn't matter. This angel of death does not look in and go, how bad you are matters. All that mattered was the blood on the outside. And that's the same thing for Jesus. It's kind of like someone being saved when they're in prison. You're always like, okay, they could have been a murderer and did all these horrible things. Someone goes in there, they accept Christ. Are they really saved? It's like, isn't that what it means? Isn't that what the blood means? What that should do is shift the way you read the rest of the Bible. Now you have to read the Bible as it's all about this choice that you have sprinkled throughout the Bible about this. And once you make that decision, the rest of it is so that you will experience a better this. So you read every story differently. If you're reading Psalms 23 and it's saying, how does it start? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. What does that mean? I shouldn't want the shepherd? No, it means I shouldn't want for anything, because you have to read it in the fact that he cares about you and wants you to experience a better day. When he says, now I'm going to make you lay down in these green pastures, he's using such strong language that says, I'm going to make you lay down so that you don't overwork yourself, that you don't push yourself, that you know you're loved. Then he goes, I'm gonna lead you to the quiet waters, these calm waters, because I care that you have calmness. And then he says, I'm going to guide you to righteousness. He goes from make you lay down and rest, lead you to calmness, and I'm going to guide you to righteousness for my name's sake. And the reason he says that, he says, now that you're living a better life, people are going to see me in you. So I'm going to guide you through that next part where you show righteousness. When you read Proverbs, all of it has the same language to it. Trust in the Lord in all I do and lean on his for my understanding. It's all about trust, leaning, understanding, knowing that he's got you. Then he says, fear the Lord and shun evil. Why? Next verse. Healthy body, nourishment to your bones. He wants your life to be better here. Here's how you get there. It's always about that, over and over and over again. How can you have a better red part? Now you go back to Luke 13. Read it again. What's the vineyard story? The vineyard story, at first glance, someone who's not really reading all this into it, goes, God comes along and says, I'm going to cut that tree down. It's not doing any fruit. So we think that's God telling us we're not producing fruit, therefore I'm going to be cut by God and burned in the chaff. Doesn't make sense if you know the rest of the Bible. It only makes sense like this. This owner comes along and he wants to cut the tree down, and somebody steps in and goes, wait, give me more time. I'm going to fertilize, I'm going to water, I'm going to invest, I'm going to love, I'm going to care for this. Give them another year because they are someone who can produce fruit. They are special. They are here for a purpose. Hold off, whoever this owner is, hold off. I'm protecting this one. That's every story in the Bible. Every story is something stepping in. The blood stepping in to death. The owner stepping in from you being cut down. Romans, same thing. This whole book, it's an entire book of Romans where it's story after story after story for your blessing. And then he sprinkles in the gospel. What does he say as you're working through it? Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. If you don't know how to read the Bible, you're saying, we're all sinners. We're all going to fall short of the glory of God. If you know how to read the Bible, you go, we're all sinners. We're all going to fall short. We're all in the same boat. I still get Jesus. You see, you have to read it right. Romans 6:23 says this, for the wages of sin was death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Jesus Christ. But what did he do there? He had a couple stories, a couple parables, a couple moments, and then he sprinkled it back in. But remember, you already have life. This part's taken care of. The rest of this is for the red part. And then you read a few more stories, read some more parables, sprinkles it in again, and goes, chapter 10, verse 9. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. Why is that in there? Because you might have gotten down going, oh, I'm not sure if I can, I don't know if I can handle, oh, that's right. That's right. If I confess and I believe, I'm good. He keeps telling you, you're good. The rest of this is for your blessing. He does it all the way through. We don't usually go this far, but I'll do it. 12:1. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world. He's saying, how do you want to have a better red part? Stop worrying about what the world's doing and instead focus on me and it will be better. He keeps going. More story, more story, more story. You get to Romans 16:9. I can't find it. It's somewhere here. Be excellent in all you do. Be innocent of evil. And what does he do? He steps in, and the God of peace will soon crush Satan underneath your feet. What is he saying there? He's not saying, if you are this and this, if you're innocent, if you do these things, then I'll do this. He's saying, do those things for a better red, but I'm doing this at the same time. Do you get it? That's how you read the Bible. And if you're here today and you feel more like this, when there's songs put out that say, and it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind. If you're here today and that's you, and you're saying, I'm just this candle in the wind, at some point I'm going to be blown out. It's this life of just burning me up. God has a better way for you. I just read it. And if you're in this room, you need to make that decision. Let me pray for you. Will you bow your heads and close your eyes?